Alright, it's quite possible that yesterday you watched a video I made here at the start of 2019 talking about what exciting things are still left for Guild Wars 2. Things the devs can actually do to impress us and thrill us and sell big expansions and push the horizons of what this MMO offers. It was a cool video, and at the end I said there's kind of two sides to that, what the devs can still excite us with. One is features and stuff like new races and new weapons and all those things, which we discussed. But the other is actually places we can go, territories, stories, subject material, things that will excite us in terms of, hey, the first expansion took us to the Maguma jungle, and was that an exciting place to go to? And what about the Crystal Desert of the second expansion, and the stories dealing with gods and dragons and whatnot? So we could do a video talking about that stuff too. A lot of you guys said you wanted to see it, so I figured it could be quite fun. And so let's start off by laying some boundaries. Some of you seem to be under the impression I'm just going to sum up now every single outstanding mystery in the entirety of an over decade-long franchise of all the different things we could do. No, that would be crazy. And obviously there's some big things on the table that we can expect the devs will probably pull off. Namely, taking the battle to more Elder Dragons. We've obviously got a couple defeated now, and I think maybe even we'll see some be defeated during Living World now. But we're going to continue having that as the mainstay. Once the Elder Dragons are dealt with, I don't really know where the story will go, but we're probably looking a lot further on than 2019 or 20 at that point. And I think a lot of where we travel in the world will be dictated by mostly that. So, yeah, that kind of goes without saying. Second of all, let's just talk in general about the massive quantities of places on the world map that the devs could easily drop new territory onto, and there's not much I can say for now. So, for example, this most recent Living World season, we were given access to this huge map here, the Sandswept Isles. It takes place on an island chain that was visible in the original game, but never playable. So this was totally new gameplay offered in a territory of the world we knew nothing about before that patch. So the devs got to play with and do whatever they wanted with the lore there. They could do that in any number of places, pretty much everywhere in the Scavenger's Causeway, the contemporary Ellen River. All these places off on the east of the world map here too that have expanded as of the most recent expansion. All of this, you know, could become playable maps, like what this body of water is here. There is no lore about this body of water. There is nothing further we can do to speculate about it other than saying, oh, the devs drew some art on there, so does that mean that they have a plan? You've also got several sections in the Delta Moor front, for what it's worth, beyond in the Maguma Wastes. The Woodland Cascades is a place we kind of got close to and got to semi-visit in one of the raids, but this was underground and it kind of doesn't count. And this delta, these are places I'm thrilled to explore one day and would really love the devs to do something of, because we got a little bit of exploration in them in Guild Wars 1, but like this delta especially, we've just not been able to look at for so many years, and especially as well other areas around Divinity's Reach. But I'm just going to mention all this at the head of the video. There's not much else to say. One thing to talk about is when Path of Fire came out and the map extended down to like here-ish or wherever it was, and then when Season 4 came out and it expanded even further south all the way down to seeing Istan here, the devs actually expanded the world map in general east. Like, it never used to be able to scroll over this far. All this stuff wasn't visible. Even this whole region name here of Deslana, perhaps a higher candidate for us to visit, wasn't, you know, noticeable on the map. Now, I think the reason the devs made this eastward expansion was not necessarily because we'll get playable content over here. It was probably just because they wanted to keep some sense of, like, width and not make the map too weirdly, like, elongated. It is still longer than it is wide right now. But I think that's why they took us further east. On top of that as well, there are expectations, and this is the next big topic of this video, that will probably go even further south to Cantha, which was a playable Guild Wars 1 region. When they do that, when we go so far south, like there's a whole ocean we get to see below there, they're probably going to want to make the map wide again. And I think next time, instead of going east, they'll probably expand it west. That's my prediction now, which would theoretically grant us visibility on this side of the Tyrian continent, which we happen to know from the larger world map. There's a coastline there and whatnot, and it might be kind of fun to see some more regions unlock over there. But when it's not a part of the Heart of Thorns expansion, I wonder how the devs will justify that. Essentially what I'm trying to say is they might expand the world map so we can see more, but what is going to be playable about it, I don't know. I'm very certain on, especially all these kinds of areas here. I find it weird to think of a Season 5 or Season 4 map unlocking playable territory that adjoins onto a totally different, now years-old expansion. So, will the devs forever leave it? I mean, certainly it's like we could get a map here. But anyway, you know, that's a huge thing we could talk about. It's not really what I want the thrust of this video to be. Speaking about that greater world map you can see on screen here, just in general, places like the Sunken Islands and the Isles of Dawn and all these places we've never, ever, ever been to, maybe are candidates, but I'm thinking more maybe another game set interior at this point than a Guild Wars 2 thing. It's just so many years before it could potentially be in scope, right? That's my thinking anyway. But there is, of course, the larger region of Cantha. That's certainly a big thing, and we know, obviously, a lot of lore exists there. There's a lot of cool things that the devs could play with to do with Cantha. We especially are interested in the idea that the Deep Sea Dragon might have connections to that region. Some kind of underwater expansion might even sort of... or underwater-oriented expansion, let me put it that way, because I don't think doing a full underwater expansion is a particularly good idea. Something like that might be able to tap into the Deep Sea Dragon and talk about Kunavang, as we've seen discussion about Glint and whatnot. And, you know, we could get back to that. Especially on that previous video I did where we talked about the Tengu becoming a playable race. That would be a perfect thing to pair with Cantha and all kinds of Canthan stories. You might be wondering, well, hold on, WP, Cantha is so far away and so irrelevant to the stories right now. What possible reason could the devs give us to justify going there, aside from a vague sensation that the Deep Sea Dragon might be there? And that would be a valid criticism, but I'll remind you how Living World Season 3, where we ended in Ore, segued us to the Crystal Desert. There was very little except just a constructed vision of, oh, he's in the desert. Okay, we're going to go to the desert. That was it. So, you know, I think that the devs can construct very comfortably and easily and brazenly whatever excuse they want to get us to Cantha, since they didn't exactly try very hard when it came to the Crystal Desert, did they? Though maybe the leaks of the expansion and stuff like that was all factoring into those decisions back then. Right, so that's Canthan, that's the broader areas of the world map, unexplored territories. What are some more tangible things? So the real thing I was excited to point out is it's not just about territory. Things we can be excited that the devs might implement story-wise can also relate to existing content and, I don't want to say features, but things that they have established expectations for and then maybe moved away from. Last year, 2018, was a perfect example. The Labyrinthine Cliffs, a map in the Shiver Peaks, had been given to us way back in Season 1. We got to explore it twice, and then it disappeared forever. But in 2018, the developers re-implemented that map with mounts in mind, with new movement in mind. They changed the invisible walls and some of the exploration. They updated all the dialogue that was there that would play ambient dialogue, various NPCs and whatnot we find. They turned it into a 2018 map that is now a permanent part of the game and cycles through as a festival. And that, I think, is a really good sign of some other places and things we could do going forwards. Last year was about the Labyrinthine Cliffs. Well, where might maybe those resources be allocated in 2019? I'm going to propose Super Adventure Box. Yep, I genuinely think Super Adventure Box might get the same treatment, and we could be finally looking at a World 3 and a World 4. The last we heard the devs talking about this was a long time ago now, where they basically said that there was no chance around then. These were during the Heart of Thorns days, I believe, where there was just so much going on for the studio, and they were operating under so many different releases and trying to keep things caught up. They'd had a very hectic release of Heart of Thorns and a very hectic post-release of Heart of Thorns. I think that was when we last heard about Super Adventure Box. At that point, they basically just re-implemented it as a festival and left it there. And they have expanded on it in small amounts every year. Like last year, we got a Super Adventure Box race added. Well, I think, yeah, that maybe we might see a Labyrinthine Cliff style treatment where they go back and they continue updating it. For years now, we've seen data mined little assets being pulled, and we know that it's probably on their mind somewhat. I think the devs probably feel, in general, just as bad as the community feels, that there's this awesome thing in the game that looks blatantly unfinished, and they probably want to patch that in. So yeah, I'm going to say that is something, I'm not saying that it will happen, but I'm saying under the header of this video, that is something they could do that would be very exciting and thrilling as actual content for the players. That's a World 3, possibly in 2019 or whatever, and in a World 4 as well, looking even further off into the future beyond. Though, you know, I wouldn't hold my breath, guys. Most people in the community are very cynical about that idea, and I think rightly so. I think getting people's expectations up about a World 3 or 4 is probably really dangerous, but it would be pretty badass, right? Another thing as well along the similar lines, content that we could get, and this one's actually way more important to me. Let's have a look at the story journal, shall we? So we've got Season 4, before that was Path of Fire, before that was Season 3 and Heart of Thorns, Season 2. What's this? Scarlets War. Scarlets War, a Season 1 history lesson. The story told in the immediate months after the release of Guild Wars 2, before the devs completely changed their methods of implementation and philosophies for post-release updates and Season 2 began. This Scarlets War section is a placeholder. Listen to this, a message from ArenaNet that has been telegraphed to the player base for years now. Living World Season 1 was a series of live content events that ran from January 2013 to March 2014. So we got over a year of content here. It chronicled Scarlet Briar's war on Tyria, culminating in the destruction of Old Lion's Arch and the awakening of a powerful entity that they're being spoiler-free with. That's one of the Elder Dragons, Mordramoth. The story was designed to be experienced as it happened. Unlike Season 2, it is currently unavailable for episodic replay, so we've created the Scarlet's War recap to inform you of the events that bridge the gap between the end of the personal story and the Living World Season 2. I've done many discussions over the years on why it's really important this gets filled in, but what I want to focus on, at least for this video, is the fact that devs are blatantly suggesting this is only a temporary thing, a stopgap, a placeholder for now. This is a very brief cutscene that is designed to show you hours and hours and hours of content and character introductions that nobody really gets a good experience of. Guild Wars 2 orients itself so much around its story and being invested in its story, and yet it's almost impossible to get a new fan into the story and into the franchise, because if they play this, when they get to Scarlet's War, they just kind of have to miss a ton, and all of a sudden the game kind of changes in Season 2. I think this is really important. I think the devs think this is really important, and a re-implementation of Season 1 would be freaking thrilling, and kind of like with the Super Adventure Box thing, it's something that we know is unfinished and feels weird to be in the game unfinished. Well, that's something that we could look forward to as the years go forwards. Next, as well, I want to talk a little bit about fractals. So when we're dealing with stories and places we can go, fractals are a really interesting concept. They can basically function at any time in the past of this franchise. So not only can they be anywhere, like the depths of Tyria, because we're about to go to the Deljamor front, and it would be cool to learn a bit about the dwarves there, but they can do it at any point. So fractals, if there's anything you're thinking, oh, I'm not too excited about going to the Delta up here at the Janthir Bay. Well, what are you excited about going to the Isles of Janthir back in the past before they were all destroyed, as the map art seems to suggest? Well, fractals can do that. I'm not going to sit here and rattle out hundreds of thousands of ideas of time and space that maybe they could deal with. But to me, fractals paired with new content, like a story update comes out, we have a big boss, and the fractal tells us the origin of that boss, just like we saw in this most recent season. That's a really cool idea. But fractals as well that dip into Guild Wars 1 retellings. A lot of people want a Guild Wars 1 remaster, and they want to constantly look back at that old lore. I don't think it's Guild Wars 2's duty to do that in general. I like the idea of new maps and totally new areas. I don't think we constantly have to be looking at the past. But fractals can do that. A fractal that shows the story of the struggle against the Titans on the Fire Island chain at the door of Kamali, and you know there's a boss battle at the end against Vizier Kilbron the Undying Lich in fractal form in Guild Wars 2. That would be amazing. I'd love that. A fractal that talks about the Delesio seaboard and recreates that region of Kryta that we can't actually explore in the sequel and possibly never will be able to in the past. That would be badass as well, getting to see those undead armies fighting against the White Mantle. Any of those situations, I think fractals are very rich for, and the devs have so much creative license and freedom, it's hard not to be excited about it. I'll note on the idea of time travel as well. That can actually be a main story thing now. That does seem to be a little bit more on the table. Now, I'm very concerned about that, and I think that when time travel gets into storylines, things can become very messy. But obviously, we have the time-space distortions happening in the current plots as the nature of Tyria unravels and magic and chaos falls upon us all. And that does kind of unlock interesting things. In the most recent release, we did see a vision of ore back when it was green and healthy. That was a part of the core story. They can go a lot further with that. The core story can then deal with ancient sequences that fractals might not have the budget to deal with. So what am I talking about here? Like, for example, I think it would be amazing to go back in time, have a vision, or genuinely go back in time, I don't know. But as a part of the real main story, to go back and see the ancient races in their prime. See the great Jotun civilization in the Shiver Peaks when they were intelligent and great spellcasters and whatnot. To see the Masat and Forgotten Alliance in their struggle against Zaitan as they die. Wouldn't it be cool to revisit the topic of Zaitan a bit? Well, main story, time travel and vision stuff, again, blows the lid open. Like, Guild Wars is in a place where any really exciting facet of ancient lore can be delivered to you, either as a fractal, if it's a little bit more small scope, or even quite large scope as a main story release. We're thinking about tying that into our own contemporary Elder Dragon fights. Like, oh, we're fighting Kralkatorrik and we go through time to see where Zaitan was way in the past or something. You know, the ways they can combine these things is really quite thrilling. So yeah, that's pretty much most of the stuff I can think of, big arena things that the devs can do. And hopefully I've instilled upon you all a real sensation that anything can happen. But last, I will round you out with something a little bit more tangible. I've been recording this here at the Silverwaste. It's for a good reason, because we're very near to a certain place in the Brisbane Wildlands. So when I think new maps in Guild Wars, I think of like current maps and where new maps might connect to them. And we've done that for years, and in many of those situations, it's ended up coming true. So here in Brisbane Wildlands, there was always this fort, and people knew you could perhaps walk through the fort, and there was a hint that there'd be another map there at some point. But it didn't happen for a few years until the first expansion. That's happened in quite a few places. We have the Ebonhawk Gate, for example, as well. Well, to me, the original, the very first example of that ever being something exciting or something worth looking forward to is here in the Brisbane Wildlands, where you can find just over this hilltop here a selection of bandits that are building a bridge, the Brisbane Bandit Bridge. And I don't know, I'm feeling lucky, guys. I'm feeling like in 2019, and you can see that portal over there, guys. You see that? Hinting that there's another map? Where there is no other map. We're going to have to kill these guys to get over there. As the way that the game was originally designed, you weren't supposed to be able to make it, but obviously mounts are a thing now, so we can just get, say, on our Griffin, and we can fly casually over. I think in 2019... we'll get up there. They've actually added a really strict invisible wall, I guess, so you can't quite get too close. Yeah, that's my guess. I'd like to see us a little bit north here, and that would excite the hell out of me. Any map that did that would be great. Maybe Season 5? I guess we'll see. So there you have it, guys. That's pretty much the big things. That's what I think is most likely, while also keeping it pretty broad. I hope you enjoyed what I had to say, and let me know if you feel like I missed anything major. I think we covered all the big bases. Maybe the Far Shiver Peaks is the one thing I haven't said, and like the Hall of Monuments, right? Oh, of course, Blood Legion Homelands did have a slight map update recently, and this is where we saw Kralkatorrik originally went to sleep. So, you know, that's a pretty big common speculation. But I think what we said at the head of the video kind of encompasses that, and, you know, regions like that. So there you go, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks very much for watching, and I will see you for the next one tomorrow.